Have you ever wondered what grave diggers those folks who stare death in deep dirt in the face every single day have seen down there? That they never dare whisper to a living soul. I've been in this line of work for over 30 years, working my way through hundreds of cemeteries, big and small. Most of the time it's just routine exhumations. But there have been a few that left the whole crew dead silent the entire ride back. Usually, it all follows the same familiar drill or order paperwork. Funeral director overseeing. Dig down 6 feet. Hoist the casket, transfer it out. Fill the hole back in and then act like it never happened. But today, I'm going to tell you about one exhumation that made me realize for the first time sometimes people don't just bury the dead. They bury their own punishment right along with them. It was back in 1916 at an old Catholic cemetery on the outskirts of a small rural town in Pennsylvania. The grave had been there since 1962. A simple granite headstone with the name of a middle-aged man etched on it. No fresh flowers, no visitors in 7 years. The court order came down for relocating the remains to the family hometown at the request of relatives. Even though no relatives ever showed up. The paperwork was clean, judge's signature. Local cops on site to witness. The original funeral director who handled the burial back then was there too. Everything legal, everything ordinary. Pennsylvania fall dirt is heavy, as hell packed with clay and shale and a light drizzle. The days before had turned the surface slick as grease. We had to bring in a small backhoe for help, but we still took it slow, shovel by shovel, to avoid cracking the vault. When we hit the outer concrete liner, everything seemed fine. It was old but solid, no leaks. But when we hooked the winch straps to the pine casket inside, it was unnaturally heavy. Heavy enough that the winch cables groaned and creaked. The backhoe engine roared just to budge it an inch at a time. I remember that feeling clear as day, like we were hauling up a solid block of concrete instead of a standard adult casket. 2 of the cops had to jump down into the hole to help, sweating buckets even in the biting cold. One of them cracked a nervous joke to cut the tension. This guy must be taking the family safe down with him. After nearly an hour of struggling, we finally got the casket up to the surface. The wooden lid was still polished, no rot, just a thin layer of dirt dust. The funeral director wiped off the old seal, checked the serial number, and nodded for us to open it. When we lifted that lid, every single one of us froze. The man inside looked about 45. Hair still jet black, clean-shaven, gray suit pressed neat with only a faint from the years. His skin was pale but almost perfectly preserved, something you rarely see after 7 years in cold Pennsylvania soil. The smell washed overpowering like in other cases, just a faint whiff of damp earth and old formaldehyde. The body was preserved unnaturally well. But then every onus eyes dropped lower. From the knees down, both his legs were encased tight in a block of concrete poured right up against the casket bottom. Not some crude cement shoes like in gangster movies, but professional-grade concrete, filled to the brim of the wood sides, reinforced with several steel rebar rods running through it like cage bars in a construction site. The concrete was rock-hard, mottled with old fingerprints and tool marks, even imprinted on the satin lining that had shriveled up like cardboard. His feet were completely gone, swallowed in that gray mass, as if someone had deliberately anchored him forever to the bottom of the casket, no escaping, even in death. Silence dragged on. Nobody said a word for minutes. The funeral director, an old-timer with nearly 50 years in the business, just shook his head slowly, voice raspy. They didn't want this man going anywhere, not even after he was gone. I double-checked the original burial records. HED brought along not a single mention of concrete, rebar, or any modifications. The casket was listed as standard pine with satin lining, no special vault. No family signatures for extras, no odd notes. It was like that concrete block had somehow grown out of the casket floor over those 7 years. The remains were transferred that same night to the state morgue for further examination. None of us were allowed to take private photos. The grave was filled flat. The old stone removed, no new one put up. The whole thing wrapped up fast, no press, no public investigation. A few weeks later, I heard whispers from an old co-worker at the morgue on solo night shifts. HED hear steady knocking from under the cold storage floor, dry, slow thuds, like someone pounding the heel of their foot against concrete, desperately trying to break free. It went on for hours, then stopped dead when dawn broke. He quit the next week, never came back to the trade. I still keep a copy of that exhumation report in an old file cabinet at home. The funeral director's handwritten note at the bottom shaky. Even though he tried to stay steady, casket abnormally heavy. Lower extremities secured in reinforced concrete. No explanation in records. No family present. All these years later, I still wonder who did that to him. Why did no one ever answer for it? And more than that, what had he done to make them pin his legs down even after he was dead? The ground holds secrets tight. But sometimes, when you dig deep enough, it whispers back stories that were meant to stay buried forever. Stories that make you lie awake at night, wandering down there in the dark. How many pairs of feet are still kicking, still pounding, still trying to get out? Imagine you're digging in a centuries-old cemetery, the final resting place for victims of a deadly plague long ago. You figure all you'll find is bones on rotted coffins crumbling with time. But then your shovel hits empty space. Down below the earth. It's not just a grave, it's a hidden passageway, a meticulously built tunnel connecting two graves. And inside that tunnel, it's not just dirt and stone, but traces of an obsession that never ended, not even in death. I've been digging graves long enough to know that cemeteries don't just hold the dead. Sometimes, they preserve grudges or the most stubborn kinds of love. It was 2018, at an ancient cemetery north of Boston, once a mass burial site for cholera victims in the 1920s, though things look a lot different now. A major drainage overhaul project meant relocating about a dozen old graves from the lowest, soggy section where groundwater had risen high enough to undermine a bunch of headstones. We started with Abigail Foster's grave, died 1923 from cholera. White marble stone worn almost blank, only faint traces of her name and date etched deep. No flowers in forever, weeds overgrown, no footprints from visitors. Expected a standard oak casket from the era, in an old concrete vault that was still mostly watertight. First day out. Like drizzle. Air thick and oppressive like always. A few feet down. The soil listened up near a busted old drain pipe. My shovel, the same beat-up one I've used for over 20 years, suddenly clanged against something hollow. Not granite rock. Not old pine roots. A dry thunk that echoed weirdly like tapping on fired brick. I stopped cold. Called over the young kid on the crew barely a year in to check it out with me. We pried back the wet clay carefully with crowbars. And there it was, plain as day, a hand-laid red brick tunnel, wide enough for an adult to crawl through. Perfectly arched vault like 19th century architecture. Not a single brick out of place or loose after nearly a century. The tunnel ran arrow straight, no bends. Straight to a grave exactly 20 meters to the right. Edmund Hales, Abigail's ex-husband, died the same year, 1923, from what old records vaguely called sudden debility. No doctor's signature. We shone high-powered flashlights inside, cold white beams sweeping the bricks. The tunnel was eerily clean, no loose dirt cascading down. No cobwebs, no signs of age. Along both walls, small animal bones were lined up neat as soldiers. Field mice, wild rabbits, sparrows, gray squirrels. All picked clean long ago, no flesh or fur left. They weren't scattered like natural deaths. They were arranged meticulously, like some ancient ritual. In the middle of the tunnel floor, The two smallest skeletons, probably rabbits, were joined into the shape of two adult human hands clasped tight, finger bones interlocked perfectly, joints fitting flawless, pointed up at the arched ceiling like a desperate plea or grasp. When we opened Abigail's casket, the air around us suddenly turned heavy as lead. Ice cold even in midsummer. The inner oak lid was clawed to hell from the inside. Long, deep fingernail scratches gouged along the wood grain, splintering it, warped and twisted like something with monstrous strength had torn at it from below. A few broken fingernails were still embedded deep, crusted with dried skin and petrified dark blood. The old white silk lining was shredded to rags, big strips dragged in one single direction straight toward the tunnel opening. Her remains were just clean bones, but still dressed in a faded Victorian white burial gown. Skeletal hands clutched toward the tunnel. Fingers splayed like she was still crawling, still reaching for the far end of that dark passage. Over at Edmund Hale's grave, it was the complete opposite, and it sent chills deeper than anything I've felt. His casket lid was pushed up from below, which shoved crooked at a sharp angle, like someone had used every ounce of strength to lift it from inside and crawl out. No claw marks from within like Abigail's, but the dark green satin lining was yanked long, big chunks caught firm in the tunnel joint. His remains were bones too, skull tilted like listening, but both skeletal arms stretched straight forward. Fingers spread like crawling, reaching, desperately trying to touch something at the other end. I dug through the old cemetery office records, thick leather-bound ledgers from the 1920s, yellowed pages, faded handwritten ink. Abigail and Edmund married in 1908, lived together over a decade before a bitter divorce in 1922 after his public affair and abandoning her during the raging cholera outbreak. Abigail died first, weeks earlier, completely alone, no one by her side. Edmund followed from sudden debility, no doctor confirmation, no family to claim the grave, no children, no heirs, and absolutely no mention anywhere of a tunnel, animal bones, or anything unusual. Like that passage had been dug in total darkness by hands that didn't want anyone to know or called in town. The tunnel was demolished the next day under strict engineer oversight. Red bricks crumbled, dumped to fill it, fresh concrete poured thick on top. The two sets of remains were moved separately to opposite ends of the new cemetery section, hundreds of yards apart, like making damn sure they'd never be close again even through dirt. On paper it all closed clean. City council report just said old construction area void discovered. No historical value, demolished. But that final night, before the backhoe finished filling the old site, the construction security camera caught footage no one on the crew would ever watch alone again. Around to 13. Under flickering sodium lights and light rain, a faint white blur not quite human-shaped, more like moving low fog, started crawling slowly across the cleared dirt. It began exactly from Abigail's old spot, following the straight line of the demolished tunnel, not varying an inch even though the ground was leveled flat. It paused midway for seconds like waiting for something familiar, then kept crawling, slow and patient, to Edmund's old position. There it lingered longer, the hazy form seeming to coil and cling, then slowly sank into the earth, vanishing completely, leaving the surface smooth, no tracks, no displaced raindrops. After that, no worker on the crew would pull a solo night shift at that cemetery. Some say on drizzly October nights, you can still hear faint scratching under the new soil. Slow, patient, like something still trying to dig that old path back. Others swear they've seen the white blur repeat the journey on the couple's death anniversaries. I didn't stay long enough to verify every rumor, but I know one thing for sure: love or hate, when it's buried too deep and too long, sometimes it won't stay put. It claws its way back up, or tunnels sideways through the cold earth, just for one last touch. Even through bare bones, even in eternal darkness and an obsession that never fades. Cemetery ground keeps a lot of secrets. But sometimes, it cracks open a small path on purpose, or by accident to let two lost souls find each other. Even if only in a nightmare that lasts centuries. Do you believe some patches of earth don't just swallow everything down? They cradle and nurture the most horrifying things, waiting for the day to give them back. I've been digging graves and relocating remains for over 30 years now. Bouncing between freezing northern cemeteries and stifling southern ones, from heavy Pennsylvania clay to sinking Louisiana silt. This job isn't for the faint-hearted. Most cases are boringly similar. But if I had to pick the place that always puts me on edge every time a shovel bites dirt, it's Louisiana. The soil here isn't like anywhere else. Mississippi River alluvial muck, which year-round, tangled with cypress roots, vines, and black groundwater. Things rot fast. Sometimes you dig down and find only bone fragments and rotted wood. But that's exactly why anything that doesn't decayed ends out so wrong. Like the swamp knows how to hold on to things it shouldn't. Most relocations down here are family matters. Descendants wanting to bring grandparents back to the clan plot, closer to the old bayou house for easier grave tending on holidays. Court order from the parish. Family signs off. Local funeral director supervises, sometimes a Catholic priest saying prayers. We dig slow because the ground subsides. Water seeps up constantly. Need pumps to work. Hoist the casket, transfer bones to a new box. Fill it in. Routine, just the thick fishy silt smell, buzzing mosquitoes, and humid heat that soaks you in sweat. But in 1994, relocating an old woman's grave at a small parish cemetery on the edge of a southern Louisiana swamp left the whole crew speechless for a solid week afterward. She died in 1968. Simple burial. No concrete vault because the ground was too wet, just cheap pine casket lowered straight into the deep silt. Limestone headstone covered in thick green moss, lettering almost gone. Relatives, a few older grandkids from New Orleans, wanted her moved to the family plot a few miles away, closer to the old clan house. Paperwork clean, all legal, nobody expecting trouble. Dig day was overcast. No rain but air heavy like a southern storm brewing. We dug slow, groundwater rising steady, pumping it out to keep going. When we reached the casket, for a strong feeling it was unnaturally light. Light like an empty shell. No weight from clinging dirt or remains inside. Then we saw why. The bottom had a perfect round hole, about 8 inches across. Edges rotted but cut clean like drilled or corroded from below. The soil underneath sank into an unnatural deep pocket, deeper than standard 6 feet, like something had tunneled up from the earth to make room. We shoveled and hand cleared the loose silt around it, careful not to damage more. And then the whole crew went stock still, hair thick as tar. Right under where the casket had sat, dozens of large eggs, each the size of a grown man's fist, were arranged in a neat, round nest like a giant bird's, but buried deep underground. Shells ashy gray, hard as river rock, smooth but veined faintly like alligator hide. They were packed tight, layered gently, no dirt in the cracks. A few had cracked long ago. Clean, non-splits. No fragments inside, just dried black slime and curled jointed legs covered in stiff hairs. Like giant spider limbs, but bigger than any recorded spider in Louisiana. Even the biggest swamp hunters. No smell at all, not fishy. Not rotten, not old formaldehyde, just bone-chilling cold when you touch them. Cold like dry ice in midsummer heat. No insects swarming, no maggots, nothing. Just those eggs sitting silent, like waiting. We called an entomologist from LSU in Baton Rouge for samples. He showed up in full hazmat, took a few intact eggs and cracked shells, face going paler under the magnifier. Before leaving, he just muttered, "Don't ask me. And don't tell anyone." The rest were burned on site per family orders. Flames burned dairy green, thick black smoke with no odor, woodland extinguished even with water. Had to bury it in dirt to smother completely. Later the family hesitantly shared the old woman worked as a venomous snake catcher and tarot reader in the bayou. Lived alone in a rotting house on stilts. Locals called her the Bayou Witch Mother. She'd bring home strange eggs found under ancient cypress roots deep in the swamp, calling them gifts from the Earth Mother. Nobody dared ask more. After that, the old swamp area near the cemetery was abandoned for good. No fishing, no duck hunting. 10 years later, I heard from a lost hunter who crashed overnight in an old shack deep in the night. He heard eggs cracking, echoing from underground one by one, slow and steady, like something finally hatching after years of waiting. He bolted at midnight, never went back. I don't know if every egg was really destroyed. I just know this. In Louisiana, swamp ground doesn't just swallow things, it sometimes cradles them, nurtures them, and waits to hand back what it took. There are pains so massive they refuse to leave with the body. They cling to familiar places, and when forced to move, they stay behind. Or worse, latch onto a living person to keep screaming in their place. In the lowlands of South Carolina, under centuries-old oak canopies, I learned it the hard way. In 2016, relocating a few old graves at a small county cemetery in the South Carolina lowlands left nobody on the crew willing to talk about it for years. One was Catherine Whitfield. Born 1894, died 1915, just 21 years old. No living relatives. No flowers in decades, tiny granite stone leaning from roots pushing up below. Paperwork sailed through, no objections. Nobody bothering to sign extra. In the cemetery's old yellowed leather ledger, just one short line in faded handwriting: died of acute nervous disorder. The day we started, morning sun already brutal like noon. My backhoe rolled up to the old section, right under a massive ancient live oak. Trunk so thick 3 men Calvin link arms around it, when a few guys started complaining of dizziness, visioned, tunneling. The newest kid, barely a month in, went ghost pale, staggered to bushes vomiting hard. I figured he tore old dirt smell. But as I lowered the bucket for the first bite, I heard it clear along. Agonized moan, female voice weak but gut-wrenching, heartbreaking. Like slow torture, breath by breath. It didn't echo from the ground or ride the wind, it rang inside my head. Right by my ear, close enough I felt cold breath on my neck. Heart pounding, I killed the engine instantly. Whole crew stared, nobody spoke. We switched to hand digging, slow and careful. The old oak casket surfaced strangely intact after 100 years. Like the ancient tree had spread branches shielding it through storms. No heavy smell, nothing else odd. We lifted it, transferred bones to the new plot in the eastern corner, open ground. Blazing sun all day. No ancient shade. Filled it, reset the stone, finished in heavy silence. But the first night after the new grave was filled, around 3, my phone buzzed nonstop. It was the kid from earlier, voice shaking, choking like crying boss. The moaning ass back. This time it's right under my bed. Not loud, but constant, pleading like begging for something. I can't move. I told him flip on every light. Pray if he knew how. Crash at my place come morning. He moved away weeks later. Quit the job forever. Never returned. Days after, I asked the old cemetery caretaker, a weary man tied to the place since the 72nds. He sighed deep, eyes distant, then reluctantly told Catherine Whitfield was from a poor farming family. In 1915, she suddenly went mad, screaming nonsense, running into deep woods near home, howling miserably at night. Villagers found her days later curled under that massive oak, fingernails clawed full of dirt and leaves, foaming white at the mouth, eyes wide staring up the canopy like seeing something horrific. No doctor, no autopsy, no proper church funeral. They buried her quick right under that tree, like hiding a pain nobody understood. Now her new grave sits in the east corner, scorching sun. No shade, but groundskeepers still swing wide around it, saying when now enclosed they hear soft crying like lonely sobbing. The small staff quarters nearby less than 100 yards, no one dares sleep solo anymore. Night watchmen sometimes hear long moans drifting from the old site direction, even though it's been leveled flat long ago. Just bare ground and relentless sun. I don't know if Catherine really followed her bones to the new spot or not. I just know one thing for certain. Some pains are too huge, too deep they won't leave with the bones. They cling tight to what felt familiar. Under ancient oak shade and cool darkness, where they felt safe even in final madness. And when forced away, they stay put. Or worse, they pick someone else, anyone who passes too close, to scream through forever. If you've ever witnessed or heard about a strange exhumation, a cemetery with unexplained happenings, or any chilling experience tied to the night and deep earth, drop it in the comments below. I read them all, and who knows, your story might get told in the next one. Like, subscribe, and hit that bell so you don't miss out, because there's a lot more dirt waiting to be turned into. Don't always stay quiet. Deep in the mysterious Ozark forests of Arkansas, folks say the mountains and woods hold grudges forever, and sometimes they hold on to creatures that don't belong in this world. As a long-time grave digger, I've seen plenty of strange things. But in 2002, relocating an old hunter's grave from forest land slated for a high-end resort left the whole crew silent the entire drive home. He died in 1959. Simple burial in a small woods edge cemetery, no fancy stone. Justice and stone slab carved with name and dates. Cheap pine casket from back then. Thin wood. No concrete vault since the ground was dry. The resort developers wanted a few old graves moved to clear space for log cabins and a pool. Paperwork legal. Surviving relative and older grandson signed off without showing up. Dig day was scorching sun. Limestone soil rock hard. Needed a small backhoe assist. When we cleared the last layer, the casket came out badly rotted, wood crumbling at the winch straps. We switched to hand tools, shoveling gently to recover bones intact. And then under that blazing forest sun, the whole crew froze. The remains surfaced quick, but he wasn't alone. Wrapped tight around the ribs, pelvis, and thighs was a massive snake skeleton, easily 5 meters long, body thick as a man's arm, vertebrae linked solid, every segment clear. Weirdest part was the head to complete snake heads, perfectly symmetrical like a mirror image, branching from the same neck, but splitting midway through the skull. Both eye sockets still held shriveled black eyes like unrotted glass beads. Snake skin had turned to thin gray-silver membrane, fused to the human bones so tight we cowled in separate without breaking them. The snake coiled multiple loops, squeezing hard enough that several ribs and pelvis bones on the man were cracked, not from ton, but slow, steady pressure. No fatal bite marks on human bones, no residual venom, nothing. Just two creatures dead at the same moment, entwined, and fossilized in place like the limestone had preserved that exact instant for 43 years. We called the county coroner and a herpetologist from the University of Arkansas at Little Rock to the site. The coroner examined close, faced rain in color, closest species to Asian king cobra. But king cobras don't live in Arkansas. And this size was double normal. Twin heads, rare mutation. But perfectly symmetrical like this. Never recorded. No fatal wounds on the snake, no struggle breaks. He just shook his head. They died together, same way. No explanation. Later, the grandson reluctantly shared when signing for the new remains the old man was a famous Ozark snake hunter. Bragged to drinking buddies about a 1958 deep cave trip. Said he caught a two-headed devil snake huge as hell. Bagged it thick to skin and sell. Next morning, bag empty, no tears. No blood. He laughed it off as it escaped. Then months later dropped dead in the woods, no bites, no cause. Remains moved to a new cemetery a few miles away. Resort built on schedule, cute log cabins, clear pool. Advertised as pristine Ozark getaway. But nobody stayed long. Guests reported faint hissing at night from under cabin floors, not wind, not pipes, but like two heads whispering, overlapping, high-pitched, searching for their old owner. Some woke too long, shadows slithering past windows, but step outside, nothing. Some fled midnight, forfeiting deposits. Resort open a few years, closed, sold. Closed again. Now just overgrown pines hiding abandoned cabins. I don't know if that two-headed snake truly died with him. I just know this. In Arkansas, forests and caves keep things that aren't from this world. And sometimes when you unearth them, they don't stay down, they call back, whisper, and wait for their old companion to return.